my name is Kim Toogood. I am the Conflict Advisor for PERL, and today I'm going to be speaking to you a bit about conflict sensitivity. So on PERL's program, we like to talk about conflict sensitivity in 3 different ways. Number 1, we like to talk about why PERL as a development program, a governance-focused program, should be conflict sensitive. We also like to talk about what conflict sensitive planning and programming is as a whole. And we also like to talk about what PERL needs to do as a program in order to be conflict sensitive. So this first session together, we're going to focus on what conflict sensitivity is. What does it mean? How is it defined? And what does it mean for how we're interacting as a program? So the first one talks about why conflict sensitivity is necessary. A few years ago, donors such as DFID, UK Aid, which finances PERL, looked at their overall development strategy. In this process, they realized that some of their programming was potentially doing harm to the places where they were working. For example, if they wanted to use tsunami disaster financing in Nepal, they wanted to make sure that a road program that was supposed to be helping support women's empowerment was actually being used in that way. And what they realized was over the time, they really couldn't account for the ways in which their programming was actually making a positive contribution to the environment. So what they came up with is a phrase called conflict sensitivity. And in their 2011 Building Stability Overseas strategy, they tried to explain what the expectation was of their partner states, such as Nigeria. In this strategy, DFID spelled out an expectation for its programming to be conflict sensitive. Why? Because they said that all development work, regardless of what your intention is, has the potential to do harm. What does that mean? It means that even if we're designing, for example, PERL, to improve forms of governance and to improve better business, better service delivery, we may in fact, in the design and implementation of this program, make things worse or unintentionally do harm. So in order to address that risk, that very real risk in operating in a conflict context such as Nigeria, PERL, as a DFID funded program, adopts a conflict sensitive approach. So what does that mean? Conflict sensitive approaches to programs such as PERL is composed of 3 steps. Number 1, it means that PERL as a program understands the context that it's working in. How does it do that? PERL tries to use political economy analysis and conflict and gender analysis on a regular basis in the program to understand the context where we are working. In Borno, Yobe, Jigawa, Kano, Kaduna, in the Southwest and Southeast Hub. What this means is that PERL takes a very active approach to conduct conflict analysis, gender analysis, and political economy analysis in each of those locations. What that means is it understands who its key partners are, what the different stakeholders' interests are in various governance reforms, and tries to create opportunities of entry points to drive forward with governance reform. The second point of conflict sensitivity is to understand the interaction between the context and the conflict dynamics within them and what PERL is trying to accomplish. So if there is a drive or a desire to improve service delivery in a particular location, PERL tries to use that analysis to understand what and how that process of service delivery reform would need to be implemented in a way where it actually makes sure that it doesn't make matters worse. The last step is to act in a way to minimize the negative and maximize the positive. We are doing governance reform. There are great chances that not everyone is going to be happy with us all the time. So what does that mean? It means that PERL can still implement the same reform as a program as other development actors do, whether it's education or health or water or even peace building, in a way where we're making sure that we're aware of the risks that are posed to our program and our program to that context. And we make sure that we have a plan B, a plan C, sometimes even a plan D, depending on the context, so that we know with some level of assurance as a program that as we drive forward these governance reforms, we're also making sure that we've taken care of addressing any number of risks that could also emerge in the context at the same time. So we present conflict sensitivity as a program using this chart that you see now on the slide. Understanding the context, how, having a conflict analysis, having a political economy analysis. If you are perhaps a member of a ministry, department, or agency, what this would look like is carrying out some sort of analysis yourself about what your program is trying to do, what your end goal is, and understanding the different stakeholders and the relationships between them on an ongoing basis. In conflict contexts that are very volatile or ones that are constantly changing because of high levels of violence, we often say that this process should occur at least every 3 to 6 months. This is because the context changes so rapidly when you're in the midst of heavy forms of violence that the actors and their interests and their positions often change quite quickly. If you're talking about an environment that has latent conflict or conflict that's under the surface, you could probably do this analysis maybe every 9 months to 12 months within a programming cycle. Step 2, as we see in the chart, understand that interaction between your activity and the context. Using that analysis, look at the list of activities or programs or projects that you're trying to do and think about what it would mean for the different stakeholders: women, men, boys, girls, those most vulnerable, people living with disabilities, whomever your stakeholder demographic is. What would that project mean for them? And act accordingly, which is step 3. How do we avoid negative impacts, maximize positive impacts? If we're aware of the risks, we have a greater opportunity to avoid them. How? Because you make a plan B, you make a plan C, and you monitor and evaluate in the process of implementing the program. This is a holistic approach to program cycles, and therefore conflict sensitivity is not just described as an output, it's described as an approach to the way that you implement your program. So I want to leave you here with these 3 key takeaways. Number 1, the development program can do harm if a conflict-sensitive approach isn't used. How? Because if you're not aware of the potential risks in the environment, there's no way that you can prepare to avoid or mitigate them. This is a very important part. Applying this approach means that you're, number 1, aware that your interaction can cause harm and you plan accordingly. Number 2, there are 3 steps to conflict sensitivity. We understand the context, we understand the interaction between our intervention and the context, and we make a plan B. We try to minimize the negative, maximize the positive. And the last thing is that by doing these approaches, this conflict sensitive or gender sensitive approach, it means that we have a responsibility, and the donor, as I said at the beginning, is going to hold us accountable to that. As a program like PERL, it means that we do need to have updated analysis. We need to use that analysis to evaluate and critique our own programming. And we need to be very iterative and very flexible with the way that we implement our program to make sure that we have that plan B or plan C in case conflict emerges. In this way, PERL is constantly trying to evaluate and reevaluate the value that a conflict-sensitive approach has to its programming in every single location where it works. And to this moment, we're very pleased to know that this conflict-sensitive approach has really made a difference in the way that we implement our program. And therefore, I leave you with these 3 key takeaways, and we hope that you'll join us for the next session where we dig a little bit deeper using a case study from PERL to talk about what that conflict-sensitive approach looks like very concretely.